One of the most common questions I get is, what is an AI system? How do you build AI for businesses? What does that actually mean? And what that tells me is that the way most folks use AI is through chat interfaces like ChatGPT or Claude. And though that's a very important way to use AI, it's not the only way to use AI, and there's a ton of other applications. So I figured it might be worth doing a video on how I think about building AI systems in order of complexity. So number one, chat interfaces. Extremely important way to use AI, and obviously where most people start. So if you're not already, which I'm pretty sure you are, start using chat interfaces to get a sense of how AI thinks, its limitations, what it can and can't do, how it responds to instructions, how to prompt really effectively to get it to do what you want on the first try, if possible. Level 2 is going to be a chat interface plus MCP. And Claude is obviously my choice for this. They invented Model Context Protocol, which is basically a really powerful way for AI to interact with the tools that you already use. So if I'm looking in Claude, I've made a ton of videos on this. If you've seen any of them, then you already know how to do this. But basically, if you click this little plus symbol in Claude and you click connectors, you click manage connectors, and then browse, you'll see a whole list of integrations that have already been set up for you that with just a couple of clicks can connect Claude to a tool that you already use. You just log in with your credentials, and then Claude has access to perform actions in that tool, like sending an email or scheduling a meeting. That is number one. If you want to dive more in depth with that, just check out my other videos. I show you how to set up a bunch of them. Those are the first two levels. So the next level after that is going to be automations. And this is probably where a lot of folks stop, and for good reason. It can be very frustrating to build automations, but let's define what automations are. Automations are basically software. It's code executing some kind of an action on your behalf that happens without you having to think about it. When I hear the word automation, to me that usually implies a simple piece of software. So something really basic, like anytime I get an email, send it to this folder. Really simple thing that's just happening in the background. You don't need production grade software to do that. It's just a very simple kind of thing to make your life and your work smoother. And something important about automations is that they are deterministic, meaning they happen the same way every single time. And that's why they've been a staple of software and business operations for a very long time. Nothing new with these. So if you start getting into building automations, which is what I'd recommend as your next step, what you'll start to find are there's a few different concepts that are very important to learn for future complexity. If you're looking to, say, build your own software with AI, it's very important and valuable to know these concepts so that you can use them, because it's fundamental to how software is architected. So one of the first things you'll learn about is called triggers. I built this really simple automation, a ridiculously simple automation to kind of show you how this works. But basically every workflow and most processes that happen in software need something to trigger them. When do they start? Why do they start? And if you click in N8N, so there's a few different vendors that provide these types of like drag and drop automation software. They all look and act very similar. And these are great because it's essentially a visual way to see how software works. Spend a lot of time in these platforms. If you're just starting out, spend 6 months to a year just building stuff for yourself, for your friends, for clients, and you'll really get a sense of how these different systems work together. But basically, the first thing is triggers, and N8N is going to prompt you when you kick it off to add a trigger. That's the first thing you do. And you can just trigger manually, obviously. You can trigger on like a chat message. But more often, it's going to be something from an external system that triggers your automation. And when the data is being pushed to N8N, it's called a webhook. So basically, you can have N8N trigger an automation anytime it receives a webhook, which is information being pushed over the web to N8N and to your workflow. And this is a very important way for machines and software to talk to each other. For this particular case, I added on-form submission, which basically is a webhook. It's a form that gets filled out that then sends that data over the internet and then triggers this automation to run. And I'll show you that in a minute. But a few other concepts that you'll start to get into that are really important as you start to build out automations and software. APIs is probably the most important. How do you get different systems to talk to each other? Because for the most part, automations are just integrations between different systems, and it can save you a ton of work. And businesses will pay a lot of money to make these workflows happen faster and more autonomously. So APIs are basically the interfaces of different software applications, and they all have their own protocols for how you interact with them, how you make requests, how you push and pull data from them. And you can configure these on your own. It's not incredibly difficult. In N8N, it's something called an HTTP request is how you send send data over the web, and then you receive, then another application can receive that request. And the great thing about these sort of workflow orchestration programs is they basically provide a lot of the integrations right out of the box. So not a lot of complex setup. You don't have to look into documentation. You can literally just, just pretty much drag and drop. So, and then the other terms, which we won't dive into too deeply today, the really important ones that you'll want to focus on are scraping, which is just a huge component of gathering information over the internet, compiling that information and getting it into some format that is valuable to a person. And that's just I've had so many clients where the entire use case was around web scraping, because gathering information is painful and doing research is painful, and we have a lot of great tools for that now. The final one that I'll just touch on briefly is databases. Databases are so powerful in the age of AI because it's essentially memory, context, and information sharing. And essentially, we have a lot of ways that we can store data. In this workflow, I'm showing you one, which is Airtable. Google Sheets is another one. But then obviously there's more complex databases like Postgres. There's vector store databases. There's all kinds of ways of storing information, but pretty much 99% of automations and software really revolve around this idea of sharing information between platforms. So databases are extremely important. So want to kind of walk you through the levels of complexity here that'll sort of help you to start to understand like what an AI system really is. So before we can understand what an AI system is, we need to understand what a system is. This is a very, very simple system. So basically we've got our trigger, on form submission, and then we have a Airtable node is what N8N calls them, but it's just a way to interact with Airtable. And if you click into any of these, you'll see how I set them up. So in this one, it's just the resource is a record. The operation is create. So obviously there's a database resource, there's a record resource. Those are the two types of resources that exist in the software called Airtable. And the operation that we can do in a database are create, we can update, we can search, we can get a record. But in this case, I just wanted to create a record. So I've signified what base and what table I want to create the record in, and I've indicated what value I want to send, which is a name. So that's what happens when this form gets submitted. So what we can do is we can actually click execute workflow, and what that did was it created it popped up the form that I created in N8N, the very simple form that I want to trigger this workflow. This could be a form in Google Forms or anywhere else, but I just, for simplicity, it's going to be right here in N8N. So it's just a name, and basically this would be like the simplest use case imaginable. Person fills out their name, click submit. You can see that triggered the automation, and everything ran successfully. These little green check marks in N8N mean things ran successfully. If I toggle over to my database, this was the table that got updated. It inputted my name. Again, super simple, but it gives you a really clear idea of what an automation is. That's really all automations are, is a series of steps that happen, trigger different API calls, different decisions are made, and something happens that saves somebody some work, typically. This is the exact same automation, but when a decision needed to be made. So in this case, the simplest form of decisions in N8N and in other software is an if statement. So basically, if the value is this, then this happens. If the value is this, then this happens. And this is still deterministic, meaning no matter how many times you run this workflow, it's going to be exactly the same. So in this case, I wanted it to, what was my if statement? Okay, so this is a true-false statement. So basically, I have a slightly more complicated form. It's asked for the person's name, and then it asks for their role. And the use case here is if their role is a manager, if they fill out manager for that value, then the record gets sent to one database. If it's something else, if their role is something besides a manager, then it gets sent to this database. So true this way, false this way. And again, this is very simple, but it's really not that different from what a lot of workflows are. It's just a series of criteria that cause different things to happen. Okay, so I click execute workflow. A form pops up. I add my name. I click submit. Workflow executes. And this is the if statement. So the role equals manager. This resolved as true because the role was manager, and then it created a record in that database that we showed you before, and there's my name again in that same database. So again, super simple still, but important because this is a deterministic workflow where a decision had to happen, but it was a very simple decision. So if we toggle over to our next workflow, this is where AI starts to enter the mix. So first stage was just automations. Second was automation with decision. Third was automation with AI. So we're still talking about an automation here. We're in a largely deterministic situation where pretty much it will happen the same way every time. Even though AI is involved, we've given AI a very simple task. So it can stay pretty consistent with that task. And what I've done here is basically added a little bit of complexity to the form. So I said, still, what's your name? And then what do you think of today's event? So I asked a free-form text question. It's not going to be the same every time. The person's going to say what they thought about the event of the day. And then in the AI chain, this is how you configure AI chains in N8N. And what we're starting to do here is it's pretty much the same as interacting with AI in chat, but we're sending it to the API. And so AI and software providers like OpenAI or Anthropic, they offer APIs in addition to their chat interfaces. And that is how you can interact with AI programmatically and send different requests similar to how you do in chat and get AI to answer or perform some action for you. And so basically, this is the message. So this is where the form is going to come into the AI. And that's going to be different every time. So this is called a variable in N8N, which means every time a form comes in, it's just going to give me the output of that form, and it's going to be whatever that unique user has submitted in the form. And then this is the system prompt. So this stays the same every time. And this is where I instruct AI what to do with that information. So in this case, it's an extremely simple prompt, and it's determine if the response in this input is positive or negative. Depending on the answer, output field reply positive or negative according to the tone of the response in clean JSON with no additional explanation. JSON is just a really convenient and clean way to share data in between systems that's pretty much universal across the software world. So yeah, basically what we have here is a little more nuance. I need AI for this task because the user is not just submitting like a true-false static answer or using some kind of drop down for like a pre-selected answer. It's inputting free text. And I need AI because AI can understand nuance a little bit. It can understand, oh, this person's, they said a string of words that I understand to be positive or negative. So let's give this one a try. Okay, so I'm going to trigger this workflow to run. I'm going to input my name. Terrible. I hated the food. Click submit. Perfect. It ran successfully. And let's see. So the AI got this response, terrible, I hated the food. It detected that that was a negative reply. I always use code to parse output of AI. It's the lazy way to do it. There are parsers that exist in N8N, but I find code just to be a very easy way to quickly parse the responsive AI, clean it up, and turn it into clean JSON. I had AI generate this code for me. So yeah, basically it outputted this to the switch node, which is very similar to the if node that I showed you before. The reply is fed in. If it's essentially, it's a router. So it says, if it's positive, go left. If it's negative, go right. And then it was negative. So in this case, that name got reported into this database, my second table. And there I am. So yeah, basically the use case for this could be like management's trying to get a sense of who the negative people are at the company. But you know, the great thing about learning how to build software and systems is the use cases run the gamut. I've seen some crazy things that people want to build, and that's the fun of it, honestly, is every job is different. So yeah, that is an automation with AI. We call it an AI automation. And a lot of folks, that's their entire business. They just build these types of automations. They infuse AI at different steps. AI makes automation building so powerful, which is why it's gotten a lot more popular over the past few years, because now you have true decision-making capability, similar to how a human makes decisions, built into your automations. It's not just these really simple if statements. Next, we have AI agents. And AI agents getting a lot of buzz, but also getting a lot of backlash because they're not as deterministic as a usual workflow. Because essentially what you're doing is giving a lot more decision-making power to AI. And we can give it a certain amount of context. We can give it, we can create really powerful AI models. We can give it memory even. But the problem is these things are still just not quite as good at making decisions, detecting nuance as a human. They're really good at computing large amounts of information, but understanding context is really where humans where humans have an edge over AI. So yeah, basically just wanted to demonstrate like a really simple use case for an AI agent. I use them for all kinds of things. There are workflows that really don't need to be deterministic, like creating outreach messages can be a little bit different every time. And you can get pretty good with the prompting to where it's at least, not saying things that you don't want it to say and staying pretty consistent. So the most common and straightforward use case for an AI agent is a chatbot. So that's what I built here, a very simple chatbot. You essentially see it's the exact same architecture as any other automation. It has a trigger. And in this case, the trigger is chat. This is just the chat module built into N8N, but you could obviously have this on your website or anywhere. This is a very common way to interact with AI. And so basically this agent is going to be triggered when somebody writes a chat message into it. And I can give it, the great thing about agents is you can give them tools. So basically I could give it all kinds of things. I could give it database access so it knows everything there is to know about my company. It can quickly look up answers to questions, and then I could have it execute actions on my behalf. So if a user reports a bug on my website, send me an email immediately. That would be a very great use of an AI agent. But in this case, I went really simple and I said, you are the customer support assistant for a plumbing company. And I gave it a bunch of fictional information about this plumbing company. So that, let's say, for example, a user goes on my website and asks, what do you guys do? It's going to send that question to the agent. The agent is powered by Claude, the simplest Claude model called Haiku, but it could be powered by any AI model. And then it answered very well. Let's pull that up, make it a bit bigger. Hi there. Flowright Plumbing and Drain. We provide a full range of residential and commercial plumbing services in Denver. These are all the repairs they do. So this would be a great like after hours chatbot for a plumbing company. But as you can see, like that's the basic architecture of AI agents. And there's a ton of ways to deploy these things. But this is like a very simple case, and you can build them right here in N8N. So those are the most common ways to use AI and build systems in this sort of like automation paradigm. And this is where I suggest most folks get started, is really just build a bunch of these things, tackle a bunch of different use cases, try a bunch of APIs, MCP servers, build your own integrations, make up your own systems, and you'll just learn a ton about how software is built. And once you're done with that, there might be another logical step to go from there. And that's kind of where I've chosen to go, is in actually building software. I'm not going to dive too deep into how like my workflow for building software works. I'll touch on it at a high level, but I've done whole videos on it. And basically what you're using is AI to essentially build software from scratch. Many call this vibe coding. It's a popular term these days. It could be considered potentially a negative term, but basically, if you go into Claude and you click on code, it takes you to a special window of Claude called Claude Code. And this is a chat environment optimized for coding. And what I like to do is I like to start in chat, and I have a special Claude project that is all about building GitHub repos for Claude Code. So how you would go about this at a high level is start with the knowledge that you've learned in your automation tools. So you learned about triggers, you've learned about APIs, you learned how to call AI providers programmatically. You have a really good sense of how to use all these different tools, components, and modules. Then you can go into chat and you can literally tell Claude how you want this workflow to look. Then basically what Claude would do is it would build, if you have it connected to your GitHub integration, which is a great MCP server that I will do a video on. Basically, you get GitHub connected to Claude and you say, hey, I want to build a CRM. I want to build a custom CRM, or I want to build a fitness tracker. And then you're going to basically need a few things. You're going to need a place to host it if you want it to be in the cloud, which you probably do. I like Vercel. It's a very simple one that also has an MCP server. And then you'll need a database. And again, I want everything to be connected to AI. So I use Supabase, which has an excellent MCP integration. So between Claude Code, Supabase, and Vercel and GitHub, I basically have everything I need to build fully functional software. And I'm using the exact same concepts that I use to build N8N workflows. I have triggers, I have different schedules that happen to perform different actions. The only thing that's different, and what I would argue is better, is that I now have a user interface, because Claude can write beautiful HTML interfaces that are hosted in Vercel. And this almost always leads to a better user experience. So instead of trying to interact with some clunky N8N workflow, the user gets to see what they're used to, which is a software interface with all these different automations and processes happening in the background that are all running in Vercel and Supabase. So basically what I do is I have chat build me the entire GitHub repo. I have it build the exact same repo locally. So it's like a set of folders and files to build out this application that I want to build. And then I go into code and I select the folder that was just created by Claude Chat. And to have Claude write folders on your computer, you need a MCP integration called Desktop Commander, which allows it to basically interact with your local computer. So it creates that local file, you then pull it up, and then you basically can say, you can make some changes in terms of the model that you want Claude Code to run on. So I like Opus, it's the most powerful one. And then you can actually have it either just ask for permission anytime it wants to do anything, give you a plan and then execute on the plan, or you can just have it start coding immediately. So I usually just do that. And I can basically just say, from there, get started on the build. And usually Claude Chat will set up a list of GitHub issues of like, okay, we need to build the interface. We need to set up the database correctly with all these tables. We need to create components for this, this, and this. All of it's going to be set in a really nice to-do list. And that's great because then Claude Code can just go and execute those actions one by one. And I mean, you'll have your MVP set up in a matter of days. That's why everybody gets so excited about vibe coding. But the hard part of all this is the debugging. And that's where most people give up because it's honestly, it is work. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to go in manually and test each little component of your software to make sure that Claude Code set it up right. And I guarantee you, a lot of it won't be set up right. But it's still amazing that a non-technical person can create software from scratch. Then you can just manually go in, check each component. Oh, that doesn't work. Ask Claude Code to fix it. Keep testing and going through that feedback cycle. And honestly, you can get there. You can get to fully production grade software. So that's kind of what I've pivoted to in terms of building out AI systems. I tend to build them now as software, but I think automations are an awesome place to start and a great way to kind of learn about software and technology. So hope this was helpful in terms of like getting you from beginner to AI automation systems builder as quickly as possible. Let me know if you want a deeper dive on anything in here in the comments, and I will see you next time.